Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. 1 second here. All right, we are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 FM on the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. We are also broadcasting live on social media, and this show is brought to you by the Experiencer Support Association. I'm your host, Ryan Stacey. I'm a licensed private investigator, and as the Director of Investigations for the Experiencer Support Association, I use my investigative skills to dive headfirst into the hidden mysteries of UFOs, paranormal activity, and the consciousness phenomenon. I'm glad to be here, and thank you for tuning in. So, for those who know who I am, it's been a while since I've done a podcast. I've been busy trying to get the other parts for TESA out and going. But for those of you who don't know who I am, this is just going to kind of be an opener kind of program to kind of explain things. If you are commenting, say hello. Hi, Lisa. I see you. Good to see you, Lisa. Hi, Chris. I see you. We are in a new studio, partnered up with UPNR Radio, and we're happy to be here. So, comment if you want. Ask your questions. If not, then you're just going to listen to me yap. And I'm going to try my best not to say anything I shouldn't say because we are now on FM radio. So, all right. So I'm going to share my screen. What we'll do, let me see here. So we're going to explore the hidden mysteries of how I got here, why I'm still here, and where I plan to be in the next few years. I'm going to start with the founder page on my website, and from there I'll walk you through my thoughts on each of the topics I'm going to cover throughout this new experimental program. I'm unsure of where I'm going to go, but we'll see where this takes me. So I want you guys to comment, say hello. Hello, Dave Barker. Good to see you. Thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions, we'll go from there. All right, so I'm going to share my screen here. So on our website, the experiencersupport.org, let me see if I can put that in the chat for you guys. It's been a while since I've done. Nope, I spelled that wrong. Would help if I put the right one in there. All right, my bad. Still getting used to this. Anyways, it's ORG. Okay, so I'm just going to share the full screen here. You don't need to see me talking here. So you can find this page called the founder page if you really want to know. I'm just going to skim through for those who don't know. Sorry, I got an. All right, so let me see here. So my bio here that's been written is essentially I'm known as a citizen journalist. I'm an active Canadian disclosure ufologist and a private paranormal psychogenic investigator. That's what I've been titled. That's really what I am. I didn't give these titles. These are just where I happen to be. I've created this thing called the Ultra Spectrum Classification System. I'm going to get into that. I'm the founder of the Experiencer Support Association. I will get into that. I'm the former host for Beyond The Tinfoil Hat podcast, which is now being hosted by my good friend Danny Whitson and produced by Chris Green as well, who's in the chat. I am previously I worked with MUFON as the director of field investigator training, and I was a former national chief investigator for MUFON Canada. So that's kind of my background in terms of that. Bunch of testimonials. If you guys want to check those out, I'll put the link in there since it's not working. I got one from Richard Dolan, UAP Studies Podcasts, Brian Baker, a couple journalists and whatnot as well. In the media, I've been featured in a lot of articles about UFO disclosure primarily. I do like ghosts. I do like cryptids. I do like consciousness, and I'm known for the UFO phenomenon in Canada, but I'm trying to break away from that because I prefer to do all the other things, but I got to do the mainstream stuff as well. So there's a whole bunch of articles here that's been written by me, including the most recent one because I was on CTV News, who play mentioned me for releasing the declassified documents of the object that went crashing down between the American and American and Canadian border when they shot down that unknown object, which turned out to be a reconnaissance satellite from the Chinese government. So that document I was able to retrieve, gave that to CTV News, and that made it to the media. So that was kind of a recent one. Up to date, I've been on television. I've been on a show called, what was it called? Evil Encounters. I did that pretty well, saved the season there because I didn't have any experts. So I did that for a little bit. Haven't been able to get back into those things yet, but that was kind of fun. But shows are kind of tricky because, you know, let me see here. Is there a better background? Yeah, that works. Shows are a little trickier. I don't know how to use this studio. I'll figure it out. Let me think here. How about that one? That one works. Yeah, so shows are a little trickier because as a skeptical sleuth, as I say, I find it hard to say entertaining stuff about the phenomenon. And if it's hard for me to say that stuff, and the media sometimes wants it to be entertaining, so it will come off as boring in some senses. So it's kind of hard for me too. But you know, that's kind of my background too, as far as media mentions. I received the paranormal investigator shout out in July of 2022. I've also closed the most cases in Canada. And that was in 2017 when I was with MUFON. So there's something as well. I've created all of these investigative and research tools. I'll get into those. Active programs, of course. I don't need to get into that right now. I'm a contactee experiencer, as you would say. I'll get into that when we get to it, but you can read about this. This is kind of my experiment. Actually, I have to remember that we're on radio now, so people can't see this. So what you're looking at on my website is this object that is full of geometric or intricate symbols, some alchemy here. There's a whole bunch of different things, and essentially it came to me during what I call a psychogenic download, or some sort of higher power experience, which kind of broke the egg on everything that I've been doing. So as is explained here, I'll read this out for the radio. This map is an image created by myself through what we understand was a psychogenic download on December 21st, 2018. The purpose and meaning remain a mystery. However, we have come to see this as a map of possibly a location, as well as individual personalities and skill sets. The map has been used to guide some of the aspects of the Experiencer Support Association. Over the years, Ryan and other members of the association have been trying to decipher what appears to be a message from the future. Learn about Ryan's investigation on this, and then there's a part one. So this part one actually will go to a long-winded article that will explain in detail what I think so far, the connection of all of this experience for me, and with the help of my research team. Of course, you can find me on social media and all those other fun jazz. We'll get to that at the end. And I've published a couple books, which are essentially surveys and reports on declassified documents and whatnot in Canada. All right. So you'll find all that. That's who I am. What do I do? Why do I do this? All these other things. So let me see if there's any questions. No questions so far. David's got to go. All right. I'll catch you on the replay. Let me see here. There we go. Be mindful of my time. So how did I get into this? Let's start here. So I was always into paranormal, but it really kind of started with aerial activity. So let's go there. Let's go to aerial activity. 1 second.
Aerial activity, sensory display.
All right. So in terms of aerial activity, which is what I call it in the ultra spectrum, I do not say UFO. I do not say UAP. Those are categories that are labels that have been given throughout the years. UFO and UAP are not inclusive of the paranormal orb, which very well could be. extraterrestrial as well as it's paranormal. So I call it sensory display because it's aerial activity. So that way it allows that paranormal orb to be in that group. The reason why it's called sensory display is because it gives notion to the possibility that we are seeing this in multiple dimensions and not just the third. And I'll get into that when we get into the psychogenic. So that's just kind of an idea around how I think in terms of that. So for aerial activity, I started with MUFON. I had an interest in paranormal activity. I was working a couple cases as I started my private investigating firm. One person had a child that was missing, thought they were abducted by aliens, and I took it as a case, pro bono case, of course, started my company, trying to see where it would take me. I eventually found the person. He joined Scientology. He was not abducted by aliens, but in order to get into that realm, I had to join a bunch of groups, which a lot of them I'm still part of today, in order to find this guy and comment and have him surface and do all those other things. But that's kind of how I got into it. So after that, through that investigation, I stayed in these groups, and then somebody piped up about being ripped off by an American company. So I had piped up and said, hey, I'm an investigator. Maybe I can help you because I'm looking for clients. Get some more information. Turns out that company was MUFON, and it was a Canadian purchaser of the investigative manual, and they were waiting for the Americans to ship that to Canada. So there was a bit of a logistical issue, but when I helped and investigated that, I got connected with MUFON Canada. So through that, I talked to an individual called Stu Bundy, and he asked me if I would investigate UFOs through MUFON. And I said, and I still say this today, aren't those government machines? I didn't think extraterrestrial or anything like that because I separated paranormal from that. So at this time, didn't have much to do. I said, sure, no problem. Why not? Let's do it. So I joined, and the first case that I got, I was instructed to make it a cold case because they couldn't find any evidence. It was years ago. There's no way, blah, 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 based on their standards. I take a look at it. I end up digging it up. I contact the witnesses. I go down to the location. I find new evidence. I find everything. I found evidence of paranormal activity, consciousness activity, and UFO activity. And that case got blown up again. It wasn't a cold case, but then what ended up happening is MUFON headquarters decided to put that in as a featured article in the MUFON Journal. And then later on through my investigations, I became the director of investigations, director of this, and blah, blah, blah. And then eventually the trainer to teach people within MUFON how to investigate things that they can't explain. And then I left that due to some politics as well that I won't get into because it's radio. But you can read all about that. So I kind of helped MUFON on the inside. They didn't, things went sour. So whatever you know about it in the media, you can bet that my name was a part of it. In terms of blowing that whistle or getting things, certain people in and out of jail, or in jail, pardon me. So eventually I had to leave MUFON, not because I'd done anything wrong, because I was getting a lot of negative attention because it disrupted the organization within. So when you tell the truth about things, you get, even if it's not at a government level, the people act the way that they act. No offense, Americans are quite aggressive. Us Canadians, we're very apologetic. We handle things a little bit differently, but we also take that stuff a little personally. So it was a little bit of an international struggle. I was the first international director at that time, and I don't think they're going to plan on putting a Canadian up on that board anytime soon. Sorry about that. Sorry, not sorry. So during all that, it was quite dark and deep for me because I was at a point in my career where I was understanding that the phenomenon was more than just nuts and bolts. It wasn't just UFOs. It wasn't just UAPs. It wasn't just machines. There was extraterrestrials. There was telepathy. There was a whole bunch of strange and unusual characteristics that were associated with it. MUFON wasn't prepared to handle anything that was paranormal, anything that had to do with consciousness. What they did eventually have was called an experiencer research team, which I was part of. I worked with Kathleen Martin on that as well. And that was kind of where I was comfortable, is getting more into the experiencer help, listening to them, trying to understand why they feel this way and how these things are happening and what have you. But it still wasn't enough, because I later learned that the experiential research team was a whitewashed version of free, and information was being traded illegally, and and that didn't sit well with me. And it was only data collection, so no actual support was given. They would take surveys, they would ask all these questions, and then they would write these books, and they would make all this money, and the experiencers got diddly squat. All right, so that's kind of where I'm at. Plus, along with Jan Harzan getting arrested, all these other things that MUFON, Olympus was falling at this time. So for me, I'm like, I got to leave this organization, but I don't want to leave the people. So I'm going to stay in this organization so we can continue to help these people, knowing that that MUFON wants me out. Okay, so MUFON, and they can't do anything about it, because they would have to publicly address the reasons why. And then there's confidential issues, and then there's a whole bunch of other things. So I had them in a very compromised spot. But that's simply because I'm an investigator. I know what to look for. I know what questions to ask. It wasn't my intention. I just didn't let any of these things slide. And I picked up on this because I have experience with working with people, and I can profile, I can predict. I can pretty well figure out a lot of these things, but but how do you prove it in terms of, this world of evidence? Evidence for me is not the same criteria as evidence for somebody else. So once that kind of happened during this time, this winter solstice, I was like really stressed and sad, because what do I do? How do I help these experiencers? And then I had that experience. So I saw this image in my mind, this one here that's on the screen right now for you guys listening to radio. Head over to YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, visual podcasts, you'll see it. So this is staying in my mind, and I don't know, but I feel like this is something I have to do. This is a leap. This is a journey. This is something I'm going to take. Then after meditating on it, at the time I didn't meditate. I'm still learning that stuff. And that's the other thing to remember too, is that at this point in time, I was learning through the experiencers the existence of these extraterrestrial origins, these paranormal events, these consciousness events, and MUFON dismissed it because it wasn't within their scope. But the experiencers, again, didn't know that it was just on the floor and being ignored. It was just, so there was that conflict too, where I was trying to help all those paranormal stuff. So let's talk. So that's kind of a good segue into my segue for a segue. Let's go into my paranormal.
Paranormal activity, sensory display.
All right. So in the realm of paranormal activity, I personally consider UFO phenomenon to be under paranormal. Paranormal simply means not normal. So if there are objects in the sky that exhibit behaviors that we do not understand or do not know anything about or can't identify, it's technically not normal. But the trick is, or the caveat, I guess, if you will, is that just because I don't know what it is, you don't know what it is, doesn't mean somebody doesn't know what it is. So is it truly unidentified? If it's unidentified to us, yes. But is it unidentified to everybody? So this paranormal activity, specifically within my ultra-spectrum classification system, will refer, again, to sensory display, but to actual activity. So objects moving. So that'd be telekinesis, telepathy, reading the mind, things like that, which also could be the science that explains extraterrestrials communicating with experiencers through their mind. Getting the psychogenics and things like that too. So there's some parallels. They overlap. They work with each other. I understand that. MUFON does not. MUFON, why? Because it doesn't make any money. Because they're scientific based. They want to put results out there. They want to put data out there, and paranormal doesn't really help with their mandate. But as an investigator, you got to accept all of these different realms of belief, because within every single one of those, there are lies, there are manipulation, there are exaggerations, there are assumptions, but there is also truth. So within my ultraspectrum classification system, my goal is to find the truth inside each of these rabbit holes, if you will, and put the pieces together to get a full picture. So whereas, as an example, with that paranormal orb that I mentioned earlier, with the aerial activity, yeah, that could technically be paranormal activity, but if you believe paranormal means ghosts, so the word paranormal itself is branded that most people will automatically assume ghosts, apparitions, poltergeists, all that stuff. It could also be within the UFO spectrum, but specifically those beings, right, which we'll get into the next category, are separate from the UFO sightings, because we don't yet know if one is inside the other, unless we have an experiencer who's seen the craft, seen the beings, and then we're able to put that connection together. But most times, and everything that I've seen throughout my careers, people are generalizing, and they make that assumption that with a UFO comes extraterrestrials. That is not always the case, and to date, it hasn't been the case. It's much easier to think that people are responsible for these crafts because they reverse engineer them, or the machine, or the governments are hiding them, or whatever the case may be. That's all normal things for human beings to do. The extraterrestrial part, or the psychogenic part, paranormal part, is something a little bit more deeper. And with the disclosure movement, part of the secrecy might be because if they say, yes, UFOs exist from another world or another dimension or another place on this planet, pick your conspiracy theory, with that, they would have to explain that also ghosts exist, or no, ghosts don't exist. Bigfoot exists, no, Bigfoot doesn't exist. So there's a lot that's going to come out with this yes, which makes it more likely and very probable that they will never say that this exists. Now, that's on the assumption that man has control. And if man has control, or women, so mankind, so the group, the entire human race, has control over the UFO phenomenon. So that would mean that man had created it, mankind. Mankind is in control of it. Mankind has possession of it. It may also mean that extraterrestrials have access to this. It might, but that would, in order for this scenario to work, it would mean that there's a partnership with the extraterrestrials and the humans. Is that possible? Sure. Is it likely? I don't think so. The UFO phenomenon, on itself could be a mix between actual craft that is experimental, that's been reverse engineered from somewhere, past, present, future, another planet, another world, all that stuff. That context is important, but we don't have that. If the government has control over it, then it's just a human normal thing. Case closed. Let's move on. I still fight the Canadian disclosure movement because I'm not sure. I'm not 100% certain that I can rule those things out, even though I think it's very unlikely. But there's still this paranormal and psychogenic and beings being observed phenomenon, right? Just because they may not be linked to this UFO phenomenon, and they still could be, there's something else entirely, and they need to be investigated totally separate before you can link them together. So this paranormal orb, if where it is this light, as an orbital circle type shape, that's usually seen after taking a picture. They could be, some of them could be dust, some of them, not all of them. And some of them could be light refractions, but there are some cases where they look biological. They look interesting. and the circumstances around how the evidence was obtained is definitely questionable. But I wouldn't I don't have enough data to conclude that that's extraterrestrial or paranormal. That is an assumption based on my faith or my belief. And that's another part of this mixture with all this mainstream crap, is trying to, I don't know if I can say that word. Can I say, I said it, let me know. Lost my train of thought because I'm trying to be a good boy. I'm not allowed to swear, and I swear all the time. So it's really hard. Lost my train of thought. Essentially, the paranormal element are these judgments and these beliefs based on our faith. That's it. So we are very easily prone to say that's a ghost when an object moves. I got some comments here. Any questions? Perfect. Michelle is laughing. Yeah, I know. I'm working off the kinks. I haven't done this in a long time, and it sucks because I'm not talking to anybody. It's really hard to not talk to anybody. Lisa says, some people say it's not from alien tech reverse engineered, but technology that was stolen from Germans, that what they used to get man to the moon, B-2 stealth bomber, F-17 Nighthawk, etc. So again, generalization. Some of those things could be true, but it may not be. And because we generalize it, and what is that saying? Correlation does not equal causation. Just because everybody's talking about it doesn't mean it's what's going on. Now we have misinformation. We have misinformation agents. Elizondo, or as I call him, Elodongo, and his crew, are misinformant agents. As of late, I've been speaking to a few within his circle, trying to get access to the back end of my database, trying to make friends with me. Little do they know that I've run backgrounds on them, and I know that they're intelligence agencies. I'm not gonna let that happen. But this is, again, another example of human behavior trying to control and manipulate. So I believe that thank you. Michelle says I'm doing great. Awesome. All right. So the mainstream plays a function. It's going to misdirect. It's going to also direct a thought. So this UFO thing is inside this matrix, and it's being used and it's being weaponized because the truth of the UFO scenario is not being publicly displayed in media. The truth, which I helped reveal and a few other people are still doing it, has come to surface, and in a small select circle has proven that all this crap that's been happening in the mainstream media is not actually what's happening. Maybe I'll create an episode where I can dive deep into that, but I mean, do your research, all that other stuff. I don't need to bombard all these people, but I do need to understand that they're not credible. So anything that comes from their mouth, I can look at the evidence if they produce something. But what do I think about all of these whistleblowers and all these other things? It's part of a game. It's a systematic thing, and I know that from being a private investigator. It's predictable behavior. It's a habit. It's counterintelligence. It's there. But why is it going on? To distract us, perhaps, of what's really going on. But what's really going on? Who knows, right? So, in my opinion, this is just my opinion on what I know isn't right. And the more I understand of what's wrong and what isn't right, I start to get into some weird things. And it's like, these weird things make sense to me because this doesn't make sense to me. But does that mean it's right? So this phenomena is so complex because we are complex. We are hurt. We believe. We want to know all these things, right? And we want to know that others exist. So let's segue into my beings observed.
Beings observed, intent unknown.
All right, keyword, intent unknown. So when we start getting into beings, that could be anything. That could be extraterrestrial. It could be poltergeist. No, you don't see the being. That's activity. So poltergeist is more activity. It would be more of a shadow figure. Could be an apparition if part of the body was seen or the whole body was seen. Apparitions are kind of iffy with me because if you can't see it, then the science side could be technology, right? Where on the extraterrestrial terrestrial spectrum, could be interdimensional, it could be all these other things. But essentially, the beings observed category within my ultra spectrum focuses on those beings. So if you have a UFO experience, so you see something in the sky and you call it a UFO, that's your choice because that's how you were raised. You believe in UFO, so you're going to call it a UFO because you don't know what it is. You've done your due diligence. You've checked air traffic control. You've checked satellites. You checked all these things, and nothing is there, right? Do you give any consideration that somebody forgot to maybe hit the button and the radar's not on and things like that? So there's lots of stuff that kind of gets in the way. But at least with that happening, a lot of people assume that inside that craft is an extraterrestrial. But you need to see that being before you can say you've seen a being. And if you see the being and you don't see the craft, you cannot assume that they got here via the craft. I'm here right now. You don't know what mode of transportation I took to get here. I could have climbed a staircase or I could have took an elevator. Who knows, right? So a lot of people imply and they project and they add these things because they read about it. They see it in movies. They talk to other friends about it. And there's a lot of things that people believe, like the Bible. There's a lot of things in there that people take literally. And extraterrestrials are in there, as an example. So when you observe a being, we need to understand the important part of that is intent is unknown. And the reason why I say that is because 9 times out of 10, you're sitting in bed or you're doing something and all of a sudden you see this being and the being's looking at you and you assume that it's there to do all these things, but you really don't know the intent. You don't know if it sees you and you don't know if it knows you see it until it does something. And when it does something to you, it's called, I call that a visitation, which is the next category, which means intent implied. So let me play that little jingle for you.
Visitation, intent implied.
Dylan Plazer says, you're been adopted by UFO. So I think you mean you have been adopted by UFO. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. If you want to clarify, I'll address that. But thanks for tuning in. So when the intent is known, that's usually when we get into visitations. So you see this being, then this being comes towards you and grabs you, or does something to you, or gives something to you. Could be also positive. Doesn't necessarily need to be negative. Then the intent could be known. All right. So until you know the intent, we should not assume that when we see a being that is harmful. A lot of us automatically assume that because it's scary looking or doesn't look normal or it's in your bedroom in the middle of the night, there's that safety concern. And these are all legitimate reasons to be concerned. We apply this negative feeling towards it because it's scary, but do we know for sure that it's causing harm? Right, so that's another reason why I break down into the ultra spectrum. I'll get into more details about this when I get into my case files on future episodes, but I'm just kind of giving you an off-the-cuff explanation with that. Then you have a visitation. They're there, you see them, they see you, something happens, so there's intent there. So these are different extraterrestrial beings or paranormal beings or beings observed that have a deliberate intent to cause something. Or it's a message, it's a hologram, it's a voice, it's a radio frequency that was intentionally implanted to do something. There's also humans could be responsible for it. Dillian Plazier says experience of it. I'm having a hard time understanding your English, so I'm going to assume that you're asking if I've ever had a UFO experience. And if that is the question, it's a great question. The answer is no. I have not personally seen anything that I couldn't explain and that I would link to the UFO phenomenon because of my research and my understanding of the UFO industry as it is. So what's the next one? So then into visitation, my ultraspectrum will build. So the next category is this one.
Residual evidence.
So residual evidence, that is a category for anything that is left behind. That includes marks, crop circles, burns, all these things that are physical evidence that were left behind. So if you work up the scale, you have a UFO sighting, then a paranormal activity, then being observed, then a visitation or communication, and then you are left behind with a memory. That also could be a memory too. Residual evidence could be memories. But that's kind of bridging into the psychogenics of the mind. So a lot of people report the residual evidence, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's linked to UFOs. It's linked to ghosts. It's linked to all these other things. So when I get these reports in, I like to have each of these things separated so I can investigate them separate and then determine whether or not they are associated with the main event, right? Just because you took a picture of something, went back and looked at it a few days later, and you saw these lights that weren't there before, and then that same night, your lights were flickering, and then in the morning you woke up and you had a bruise on your leg. All those things in a paranormal or enthusiast or UFO enthusiast mind or an experiencer's mind may very well believe that they had a paranormal or extraterrestrial experience. And it could be true, but those are also coincidences that kind of stacked upon itself, right? Seeing something in the sky could have been a misidentified aircraft. Beings observed, who knows what you saw. All these other things as residual evidence. That bruise could have came from your sleep. I hope you're trying to explain that how we as experiencers, when we make our report, make it really hard for us to quantify because we need the truth. And when you're in this excited mode because you want to have an experience because you believe, or you really believe, or just want to be part of the club, that gets there. Now, that does not mean I don't believe you, okay? I'm skeptical, but I'm still in it. I may not agree that what you think happened is what happened, but I'll work with you through investigations, and I'll give you examples on future episodes to work through that, because I need to rule out possible explanations. I need to understand your environment. I need to understand certain things. Right? There's no judgment on certain things. And just because somebody has a sip of alcohol or smokes a joint and then has a UFO sighting, that's relevant to know. But if it doesn't impact your experience because you had a picture, if you had a picture of it, then, some of these things don't really matter. And there's a lot of judgment that kind of goes into all these report writings, especially with MUFON, because they're looking for that quick money, something that they can make in the entertainment business, take advantage of the experiencer, what have you, and make a quick dollar off of it. So when my investigative process takes a long time, it's very thorough, and I have less is more, quality over quantity, like all those sayings, essentially is where my research is coming from. And I do apologize for those who have put cases in and stuff like that. I had to bench cases for a while because I keep getting the same types of reports. And I don't want to dismiss these cases because there's trauma associated to it, which is where the experiencer support part comes in. Is I wanted to build a platform called like the Experiencer Support Association. So we'll get into that because it's part of the my experience. I'm just going to be mindful of my time too.
Psychogenics and esotericism.
All right, so psychogenics and esotericism. This segment, whenever I have content about this in the future, we'll be talking focusly on anything that has to do with the mind. Esotericism is essentially the occult and masonry and things like that. This kind of religious, spiritual kind of elements that will play into the belief that kind of gets it in the way. And I'm not trying to dismiss it. I believe that something is going on. I do. It's just what's being told versus what's being reported, what I'm able to uncover. The things that make sense shouldn't make sense. And if anything, it's put me in a very dark and depressing state. Once I've learned that these things exist, I can't go back because I am logical enough to know what I know what research I've done, know what works, what doesn't work, and have this fit in a fourth, fifth, sixth, or seventh dimension experience is mind-blowing, literally, pun intended. And when I was with MUFON, I was so two-dimensional. I had no idea that there was consciousness, or it couldn't even comprehend anything beyond the mind. I didn't believe that any of this stuff was possible because it never happened. And then it happened to me. And now I'm processing this higher vibration, all this other stuff, meditating, frequencies and things like that. And as I learn and as I grow and as I meet other people, I get introduced to other different things. But the weird thing for me is that when I made this map through this vision, I did not know what any of these things meant until future times in my life. It set me on a journey. I would put this up here. People would resonate with it and say, hey, this looks like this from this culture. This looks like this from this culture, this and this and that. Then I would fact check and I would look in to see if this person's credible. And sure enough, it matches. So for me, it's like, I know for the experience that I had, I didn't know this stuff. I know this. How do they know? Is it a coincidence? Is somewhere in my mind subconsciously? Is it something that got delivered to me through extraterrestrial or radio frequency? Did I pick up is this my Mercury rising moment where I solved the puzzle from the CIA? Like, I really don't know. But it was just, I started feeling a part of something bigger. But with that comes fear and anxiety and depression and all that other stuff, because it's like, this is really what's going on. Forget UFOs. UFOs is sub-level. But it could be connected. It has to be connected in some way, depending on how you look at it. I study the people and how it affects the people. And I learn about the phenomenon through the people. I learn more about the phenomenon through studying the people than I ever do about studying the objects, because I can measure the people. I can't measure objects that are unidentified unless I can identify them. And if I identify them, then what's the point? Case closed. But for those who exhibit, superpowers, if you will, that's intriguing. That's interesting. That needs to be tested. And when it's tested, there's evidence of that. So is that spiritual connection associated with extraterrestrials? I don't know. Right? And that's where we got to get into what's called the fringe. I'll be right back.
The fringe, geocentrism, and ancient history.
All right, so that's another topic. And the reason why I'm going through these topics on this episode is to kind of layer them. This might be a reference point, because in future episodes, I might just jump to full throttle and go into the fringe, which is way out there. But you got to understand how I got there to this way of thinking. And this is the problem that I'm facing today, is to me, the shape of the earth is questionable. I do not necessarily agree with the way that the earth has been depicted based on the images that have been provided. I'm willing to change my thoughts if more substantial evidence can be provided. NASA doesn't tell the truth. NASA has lied. Our Canadian Space Agency has also lied. So there's lots of reasons to suggest that they're lying about extraterrestrials and things like that too. But when you question the way that the world operates or works, it opens up a big can of worms. And when you start making these connections, it makes sense. It's comfortable. It's fitting, but it does not mean it's true. I spent a lot of time talking to people in the flat Earth community. And why? Because I wanted to understand why so many people, hated this. And I wanted to get into that and start looking into it and try to understand what that was all about. And what I learned through the people is that the commonality between the UFO community and the flat Earth community is that they both do not trust NASA. That's a commonality. Does that mean NASA can't be trusted? Well, maybe they can be about some things, but not everything. And with that, they both agree that the moon landing may have been hoaxed. And there's some people in the UFO community that believe that. And there's evidence that supports that. What does that have to do with the shape of the Earth, right? So believe it or not, the flat Earth movement is not so much about the Earth being a literal pancake, because that is something that is oftenly used to make fun of that community. But it's more so geocentrism, where the Earth is the center and everything moves around the Earth or within the Earth. And using those principles or using those philosophies, which as an astronaut, I cannot prove or disprove, it could exist, might not exist. And if I'm going to support experiencers of all walks and all beliefs, I have to give some consideration to the flat Earth community. And the more I get into that, the more I start to see. And I start to see with my own eyes that, hey, it's possible. But I also know that it's also could not be possible. Right? So we trust and we distrust and we got to associate. So there are some things that are true from every single phenomenon. You got to package them all together in the ultra spectrum and put it all together. So that's why I created, again, the ultra spectrum classification system.
The ultra spectrum, putting it all together.
All right, so this classification system is designed. You can find this classification system. I'll get more into the map. Maybe I'll do a special episode on that because I'm being mindful of time. And this is not my station, so I can't overrule. Sorry, folks. Got to follow some rules these days, which is something I'm not used to. Oh. That's the link, but it's got an ad. You can skip the ad. But anyway, so if you guys want to learn more about my experience into detail, it's in depth there. And we'll talk about it in future cases as well. With the ultra spectrum, though, so if you go to the website and you click on investigations, and you click on the ultra spectrum classification system, you can read about my classification system here. This is how it works. And there's an evidence rating scale, which I don't really have too much time to get into. And I kind of explain all this. Also in this is an article that I wrote explaining why I created this classification system. And what it is a advanced classification system that complements Hynek's classification scale, Vallée's classification scale, and it brings in, oh my God, what's his name? John Keel's super spectrum philosophy, which bridges the paranormal and the UFO together. So I have different types of evidence ratings, and I will be talking about these when I get into cases, and that's why those little segue videos are using that language, because I want to teach you guys how to use this classification system, because it makes it easier to comprehend and understand and separate these things, bring it down to its right categories. All right, and then in here too, so again, sensory display, visitation, beings observed. Hybrid is a combination of all these things, residual evidence. I give examples of all that. This is free if you want to use it. At the top here, if you click here, it will explain how I got here and why this was needed. And also, I also need you guys to know that my ultra spectrum classification system was reviewed by Hynek's son, Paul, in great detail. And he recommends this classification system. So it's a robust new system that has been modeled after his father's work and everything else, and I got him and his family's blessing to essentially try to push forward a new classification system to bridge all this stuff together. Okay. For those of you who are like big UFO fans and don't want to think outside the box and wondering, who's this guy? Read about it. You'll understand where I'm thinking. This is just how I do my work. Okay. And we'll go from there. All right. Where's my time? Okay. I got a couple minutes left before my closer video. So let me do my updates.
TESA news and updates.
All right. So as you know, the Experience Support Association is my organization. It is not just me. There is a full team that I have that comes through here. If my links will work. There we go. So there's myself, of course, Chris Green, who's in the chat as a producer. Alex Mastretta, he's our resident cryptozoologist. Dawn Marie, Peterson, she's also going to be assisting with a program which is called Experiencers Anonymous. It is a virtual group that experiencers can come in and share their experiences and talk about it. No investigators are allowed. That includes me. And because once I'm in and I'm asking questions, it becomes an interrogation, and it's not really good for the experiencer. But it's still good for me on the research part because I can talk to Don and try to get a real good gauge on the experiencer's comfort level to determine whether or not we need to document these types of experiences. And also, if I get a case that comes to me that is riddled with trauma, there's a resource for me to refer to immediately, so to help them vibrate at a lower, like a balanced frequency, if you will, instead of just leaving them hanging, because everybody reports usually wants help immediately, and that builds on the anxiety, especially when people don't get back to you. So that's kind of in place to kind of give me some time as well. Of course, Danny, he is our podcast host for Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. Christy she helps us with declassifying, transcribing declassified documents, and Michael Hurst, he's another podcaster. He's also a writer for TESA. So there's a few people there. You can find everything about TESA on the website. Okay, you can find more about me and everybody else. We write about articles. We write news. All right. For those of you who know, Chris Rutowski is Canadian Current Events or Canadian UFO Survey. I did an audit of it. I'm not too happy about it. It's not accurate, but yet it's public. It's famous, quote unquote. But if you read this, you'll understand why it shouldn't be used in the future. That's my opinion. You can disagree with me, that's fine. But if you disagree with me, I'd like to know. So that way, if I agree with you, then I'll start changing things, right? I'm also covering the discovery of UFO activity in Canada. Sky Canada project is coming up. There's things like that's going on. If you don't know what these things are, read that. It's all there. Of course, our Beyond the Tinfoil Hat podcast is here. This podcast will start up here. My latest investigations are up here. I'm going to dive into these cases on future episodes. Declassified documents, as they get uploaded, I will put them in here. With that declassified, with all those cases, I have a visual evidence database. So this is where you get pictures and images in the actual locations. This isn't everything. These are cases I've investigated, and this is evidence that I've collected and verified. I'm not going to put everything on the map. Only the things that I can speak to, and so that way I can fully understand the phenomenon. At the same time, this evidence is logged in through time, so it's measured in time, which is very important, because if I get a declassified document that's from 1956 and I publish it today, I need to also look at it in the timeline to be like, okay, how does that make sense with all the other documents from 1956? I also have a digital crazy board for those who want to see who's associated. So every document I extract who the people are, what company they're a part of, all these other things, right? I'm logging out in 2 seconds and all these other things. And then a whole bunch of other resources and things like that too. You can make a report, click submit a report right here. And that's basically it. And if you want to buy some stuff, that's stuff at the end too. All right. So I'm going to end it. The next show is going to start soon. And if you guys have any questions, you can find me on Facebook. Actually, I'm on Patreon. So patreon.com/heedtheworld is where you'll find me. I have a private chat to talk to you on one-by-one. Everything else, it's really hard. Unless you have my number, it's really hard for me to get going. So I think I covered that. So thank you for tuning in for this episode of The Skeptical Sleuth. We're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 FM on the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. We are also broadcasting live on social media, and this show was brought to you by the Experiencer Support Association. And as always, thanks for looking up. Keep your eyes in the sky. Heed the world.
If you want to really, really find out about Ryan, ask him about all his work and UFOs in Ontario.
Ryan is one of Canada's leading new UFO investigators. He conducts and oversees UFO investigations on a constant basis. He's compiled a tremendous amount of data regarding UFOs in Canada.
I have used his research extensively. He's much more than a one-dimensional character. He's an authority on UFOs and investigating them, Meg.
Wow!
Really goes over how UFO investigations are done and what are some of the mistakes that people make when they submit evidence. For starters, don't edit your videos or photos before you send them.
He would come out with an annual report on not only the number of sightings, but how many were unexplained, unknown, or just, nothing could be said. What caused
it? If you want to hear more follow-up conversation between Ryan and myself, you can go to richardolanmembers.com, where we have a candid conversation on ufology, the paranormal, and more. And remember, while we learn and grow and search for the truth, let's be good to each other.